Okay, thanks everybody for hanging in here to listen to our presentation. We have a bit of a different format here. I'm Patty Morrissey. I'm CEO of a company called Global Foresight Strategies, and I'm here with two of my strategic advisors, Warren Fishbein and Paul Schulte. Our third panelist, General John Allen, wasn't able to be here in person because of a little bit of a schedule change. But we'd like to spend some time with you guys talking about how all the issues we've discussed today, all the strategically important issues, how we can think about them systematically as an interacting set of phenomena, which we call strategic foresight analysis. So I'm going to provide a little bit of methodological background. And then we're going to have some examples of the analysis that we have done over the last few weeks, and I will get to that in just a minute. Consistent with the Bucharest Forum's objective to cover major trends that influence business, politics, and our societies, and to promote forward thinking on geopolitical, economic, societal, technological, and environmental change, Global Foresight Strategies, our company, is in the business of promoting dialogue between governments and private sector organizations on strategic issues and helping them build a disciplined, sustained foresight practice to provide early warning of disruptive future challenges and opportunities. As we've seen the overall unity that this region has demonstrated in supporting Ukraine's courageous fight against the Russian invasion of their homeland, public-private partnerships are absolutely crucial to progress towards security and prosperity in this region. As has become obvious today with the many very interesting panels, governments across the region will need strong support from business, from private sector to help develop solutions to the serious challenges they face. And businesses will benefit from gaining a sophisticated understanding of the strategic context in which they are investing and operating. That's come up a lot. Lots of complexity in how we deal with all the change in the region. So a little bit of background for our team. Warren and I both have more than 3 decades of experience working national security for the United States government. We were part of a program that was started in 2007 called the Global Futures Forum. Both of us led that organization as the U.S. representatives. That in particular gave us really deep experience in how to think about the future in a systematic way, how to do it with international partners, and how to do it in a way that is relevant to decision making. So we built our methodology for our private sector company around our experience with that, and also many years of futures analysis for the Pentagon in my case. Paul has a long and distinguished career with the UK government, working for the Ministry of Defense in the UK, culminating as speechwriter for the defense minister, and has done many things. He's a college professor now and a consultant and part of the Alphen group of brilliant thinkers around the world. We also have a few strategic advisors. One is in this room. Alina Anaya is one of our strategic advisors. And from the concept that we have for strategic advisors, basically, we get a spectrum of people with regional expertise and with foresight expertise that, as a group, can devote different levels of time. But the networking, the way we can operate now as a community of Zoomers talking to each other on a regular basis, we've built a very flexible model for pulling in the smartest people we know to talk about what's happening in the global trends and how those global trends are impacting a particular region. So as we sort of built this approach, we had to think about identifying decision points for actions that shape a free and prosperous future as our goal, right? But then we had to examine, what do we mean by a free and prosperous future? We had to look at what are the underlying values around that. And I think from everything that this forum represents and everything we've heard today, I think we are very much in line with, we would like a world where people can choose their leaders free of disinformation, free of coercion, free of threats, and we can elect people who will act in an ethical, transparent way to benefit the greater good and not themselves or patrons. That's a fundamental principle that the vibe in this room, the commitment that you hear out of all these speakers, that's something I think everyone has circled around, but maybe not in an explicit way. So we've developed a regional program for Central and Eastern Europe because we thought, as a new company, this is the region that's undergoing incredible change and confronting incredible challenge with Russian aggression. So our Foresight practice is rooted in empirically based and comprehensive and integrative assessments of the global factors affecting this region's long-term security and prosperity. And our goal is to work with private sector and governmental organizations to work through the complexity, to work through the intersections between these trends, and then to describe that good future that we're all striving for and the decision points that we need to shape to get there. So this fancy slide, sorry, is just a representation of the change in the world, the destabilizing impacts of war, accelerating technology change, disinformation, climate change, and a deadly pandemic have intersecting causes and effects. And millions of people are living through this right now. So understanding the trajectories of this change and how they interact is a huge challenge for decision makers. Even if you look at each one of these panels in and of themselves, it's very complex stuff. And we've taken on the idea that if we get the right people and get the right connections with people, that we can set up a process by which we look across those different trends. And then to try to assess what does that mean in terms of risks and opportunities that government and private sector should be both be aware of. So not to get too academic, but this is a little different panel here. We spent a few months with my core group of senior advisors, most of whom have PhDs and 3 to 4 decades of experience in strategic planning and international security. We came up with these 10 trends as our higher level construct for analysis. We start with deep dives on each of these trends, and we ask our experts, most of whom aren't strategic advisors. There are other people that we ask to educate us through an hour or so of online seminar. And we just finished 7 seminars with some incredible people. They're available if anyone's interested. Please approach me. We've recorded all of them, and they cover most of these issues. I think we only missed the demographics because our demographics person got pulled away. But the demographic issue was blended into a few of these others. The second phase of our methodology, we look at these factors and we have a tool that helps us walk through how do these things intersect. And it's a little painful, but it's sort of required intellectual exercise for, I heard all these different, I heard 10 different seminars on these topics. What did I learn about how this relates to the other ones? And that, again, approach me if you want more details. It's too much for today. And then we have an in-person meeting where we evaluate the results of the tool and we talk about, okay, what are some of the disruptive futures that we can see emerging from the combination of these global trends, and have a discussion kind of what are the things that are coming to the top that we haven't really talked about, and what do they mean? And then What do they mean for businesses? What do they mean for governments? And that's an two-day in-person meeting that we are planning for March, April of next year. And then we're going to sustain this process with clients from government and private industry over time by doing biennial reviews and at the same time doing constant monitoring of the trends that we thought were most important to that region. So to prepare for this program coming up, our formal program starts in January. We held our online our seminars that I just mentioned, and we looked at the future of Central and Eastern Europe over the next 5 years. No doubt with all the expertise in this room, we missed a few things. This was our foundational knowledge that we would like to springboard off of and refresh in about 2 months with partners, clients involved. But what we produced was a set of preliminary analysis of disruptive futures that we'd like to present today. We will be presenting more definitive findings. The plan right now is to do that at the Strategic Arc in Warsaw in May. And so we'd like to really broaden our net with experts and just interested companies and interested government officials that want to be part of that conversation to get more sophisticated about understanding where we're going. So with that, I want to turn to my colleague Warren Fishbein. He is going to be covering one of the disruptive trends that we worked on together. You will also find these in the paper that we submitted. It's on the website, and that kind of is a nice crystallization of where we are right now and where we hope to go. So I'm going to turn it over to Warren. Mm-hmm. Oh, do you want me to? Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to talk about what I found to be a very intriguing convergent disruptive future, as we're calling them, but not a negative one, a potentially positive one for the CEE countries. In the economic sphere, we see a reasonable possibility of these countries taking advantage of opportunities offered by a convergence of several trends to strengthen their economies over the next 5 years.
Sorry, we're trying to get it back up, Warren.
Okay, let me get back.
It was there for a second. See.
Yeah.
You can go ahead and talk and then, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, move ahead one now. Okay.
All right.
Okay. That disruptive future is highlighted in the center bubble. As you see, we're using this Venn diagram approach to emphasize that we're looking at the interactions of trends from different domains. And here we have four major domains that we looked at: global economic challenges, accelerating technological change, evolving geopolitical competition, and escalating challenges to effective governance. Now, the most important opportunity that we talked about arises from a trend towards a fundamental restructuring of the global economic relationships towards less risk. That's due to rising geopolitical and economic tensions, particularly between the U.S. and other Western countries and China, as well as from vulnerabilities of long supply lines as revealed by the COVID pandemic. One key aspect of lowering risk is reshoring of production from East Asia, China in particular, to more secure, closer venues. And this may be of special benefit to CEE countries due to their proximity and, of course, good relations with major foreign direct investor countries such as Germany, the prime investor, and the United States. That advantage may grow over the next few years if a trend towards regional conflict in the evolving political competition bubble. If that results in conflict spreading to the Middle East, where it already is starting to spread, and to East Asia, potentially with a conflict over Taiwan, the desirability of locating in Eastern Europe would increase significantly. Those aren't the only factors that could help CEE economic performance. There's also the benefits that may be derived from business investment in climate change mitigation, fulfilling those requirements, from a transition from energy dependency on Russia and oil and gas to renewables, nuclear, and other forms of localized energy, and in meeting all the increased security requirements of NATO's eastern flank countries. That's the climate trends and geopolitical trends combined. Now, will CE countries respond effectively to these opportunities? Our deep dive on the region identified both positive and negative trends, which we believe that the positive ones are slightly stronger. So long, one caveat, so long as the region and the West in general can prevent Russia from advancing politically and territorially in Europe. Now, the most important of the positive trends was revealed in our seminar that we did on accelerating technologies, where we learned that CE countries are in a strong position to expand in advanced technologies and to siphon off business that might go to other regions in the past, due to the fact that they have a well-developed IT AI ecosystem and a significant STEM-educated workforce. The same is true regarding advanced manufacturing capabilities, given the existence of advanced manufacturing and IT hubs in several countries, Romania, Hungary, Poland, Slovakia, and the Czech Republic and Bulgaria. All of these are plausible locales for new investments. Poland, Ukraine, and Bulgaria also possess deposits of minerals needed for both IT and renewable energy technologies, providing the region with the potential to become a local supplier, a regional supplier for Europe, Western Europe, and North America of critical minerals. In addition, the tech sector will benefit from likely continued growth of CEE's defense production sector, which is already operating at a high capacity due to demand from arising from the war in Ukraine. Here again, this trend could well accelerate if regional conflict spreads over the next few years. And finally, investments in renewable and nuclear energy to comply with EU net zero objectives, which so far I believe, I'm not a specialist on this, but I believe from what I've read that CEE leaders have been more resistant to than others in Europe, and as well as to substitute for natural gas import from Russia. This will have an impact on CE economic performance, both directly, but also by supporting demands from related high-tech products that the region will be producing more of in coming years due to reshoring. And now there's some other, those are the more positive driving trends, but there are some negative ones. For instance, as we learned in our seminar on emerging global economic challenges, de-risking itself is double-edged because it also raises import prices for a region that is heavily dependent on raw material imports and accustomed to cheap industrial and consumer products from abroad. Moreover, there's some other big trends, a global economic slowdown driven by anti-inflation policies, which could affect the level of foreign direct investment in the region. And there are also EU pressures on businesses to adopt stricter standards, especially related to ESG criteria, which could slow down FDI in the region. There are internal political issues as well. We had a seminar on escalating challenges to effective governance, and these revealed how pressures brought on by war and climate-driven and economic-driven migration are being heightened by Russian disinformation to stoke fear and mistrust in elected leaders. This undermines governments' abilities to pass necessary and legal and anti-corruption reforms to ensure transparent and accountable business practices to replace financial systems that were corrupted under Soviet governance and are still vulnerable to corruption, especially when this is sustained from the outside via bribes and threats. But the most important potential obstacle to this in this seemingly happy story is Russia's continued military aggression and non-military pressure results in Ukraine's full or partial defeat. The adverse impact on investment, on the investment climate in this region would be immeasurable. Any companies wanting to stay in the region would face pressures to do business Russia's way, leading to massive and predictable brain and investment flight from the CEE region. So to conclude, on balance, we assess that Western economies' need for secure supply chain and CEE's need for new energy solutions and increased military technology give business within and interested in CEE a positive demand signal. Such countries as Romania, Hungary, Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Bulgaria have advantage in IT, advanced manufacturing, or new minerals mining, sufficient to overcome the drag created by adverse global and regional economic conditions, political polarization internally, and labor shortages within CE countries. So barring a negative outcome in Ukraine, these should be sufficient to yield healthy economic growth over the next 5 years. Again, this is a preliminary judgment subject to review when we have a full meeting, and periodically needs to be revisited due to the complex nature and interaction of all the variables that we're watching. Thank you.
I'm going to be talking about disruptive future number 2, the impacts on the Central and Eastern Europe of intensifying competition for leadership and power within geopolitical blocs. And in contrast to the exhortatory and obligatory optimism of this morning, this is going to be largely bad news, problems to which there are no immediate answers, but it's good to see in advance. So this is around which blocks of countries make the most compelling argument to the world about how to govern, how to deal with the complex global challenges, which have been called the polycrisis, a term I think we'll hear more and more of as it gets worse. And you can feel this every day in the global news. You can certainly feel it in the UN. It's a competition for credibility, influence, and security. Centralized versus dispersed institutions, democracies versus authoritarians. No rules. The competition will go on in many spheres. We looked at seminars on evolving geopolitical competition. And here, Central and Eastern Europe's historically fragmented and threatened geographical position at the center of a classic so-called Shatterbelt. Do you know you're in a Shatterbelt? Political geographers call Eastern Europe a classic Shatterbelt, an uncomfortable place to be. It's fragmented and squeezed between big empires in different directions who don't leave you alone. And you have to deal with their expansion and their threats. So that's going to remain. Central and Eastern Europe will remain in the front line of competition. And Russia is today very deliberately asserting that it's not entitled to its autonomy or integration in any other structures. It's a contested zone between a godless, degenerate, perhaps satanic and failing Western Europe, but it's still threatening to Russia, and decent, orthodox, values-driven, traditional resistance to Western hegemony. And it's trying to prevent this region's full entry into wider Western political, economic, and security structures. And it will do that in any way that it can. Our Changing Character of Warfare seminar looked at the bad news emerging. Global arms control regimes have collapsed. The battle space has widened to embroil civilians. It's becoming dominated by dual-use technologies. And that process is occurring against a diminishing ability or willingness of the international community, if there is still an international community, to enforce peacetime treaties or the laws of war. Military cooperation and political cooperation is evolving. Unfortunately, it's between Russia and the other states opposing the US-led world order, notably China, India, and North Korea. And in addition, our economics experts, as we've heard, looked at the inflationary and economically destabilizing aspect of the war in Ukraine and the way that sanctions on energy and food have impacted cost structures. The global competition for leadership is inescapable. It's going on in the context of rapid economic, environmental, political, and socio-political cultural change. CEE countries will have to live in their Shatterbelt battle space in a multidimensional conflict between two very different models of how to govern. We can look out for other models, but the core competition is between top-down leadership and a form of political power coming from the collective choices of the society. Ideally exercised through free and transparent elections, though how they are to be defined and checked is a problem in itself. Central and East European populations seem to be more attracted to the democratic model. They say so that periodically, and their politicians say that, but they are a vulnerable, high-value target in the perilous competition for global support and for leadership. So we look in our analysis at what could go wrong, what's not, there's kinds of things which were not being talked about this morning. Weaknesses and crevices in the structure of Eastern Europe, which the Russians can note and exploit. And I just mentioned some things to ground this session. We're talking about historical national rivalries and resentments. We're talking about xenophobic nationalist parties. We're talking about state capture by highly partisan politicians, illiberal activists, jury rigging, pervasive, uncorrected corruption, trade wars, blockades, splits over defense burden sharing, vetoes within NATO and within the EU, and diplomatic breakdown over immigration quotas. All those things you can see in the daily news are there, they're part of all this problem, and they're quite likely to get worse in ways we trace out in order to avoid.
Thank you, Paul. We're getting a little short on time. We had a third, can you hit that, Warren? We had a third disruptive future. Just hit the arrow right there. Here, sorry. Should have brought it with me. This is one I worked on right away because the obvious potential future is that Russia could escalate its full spectrum of hybrid warfare techniques. I don't want to get into all the details right now because we've got General Allen coming in via recorded tape from Tuesday night, and we need some time for that. So let's run the tape, and then if we have time to get back to this, we'll do that.
Patty, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to come in remotely. I am very sorry that I can't be with you all today. Bucharest is one of my favorite places in the world. I love Romania. I love that region. I've got so many friends in Central and Eastern Europe. It is truly the crossroads of the world in so many ways, and I think gives us insights and opportunities strategically that we'll find in just a few other places on the planet. So I think this is a great time to come together. The Bucharest Forum is well known for bringing together great minds on great issues, and it appears that it's going to be the same way again this year. So I'm very sorry that a schedule conflict kept me from coming in, Patty, to be with you and Paul and Warren. I'm sorry, but it's really an important moment, and this is a great panel. And I want to thank you for the paper that you wrote. I thought the paper was very good. And for me, the difference between prediction and foresight is that you can, through a paper like this, with the idea of talking about potential disruptive futures, give people indications of great and important global trends that we should all be thinking about, as opposed to a specific piece of information or a prediction which could or might not come true. So I really like the idea of global foresight as a means to help decision makers with the big decisions that are coming by virtue of the mega trends that they're going to face. As I said, both in terms of the Black Sea region and Central and Eastern Europe, I think that entire region is going to be central to the security of Europe going forward, to the security of the southern portion of the continent, and even in the Middle East as we go forward. And of course, how Russia goes with respect to the Ukraine war is going to define much of the opportunity that we'll see in the future. Now, Patty, as you know, I've spent a lot of time in strategy positions over the years, whether it was in East Asia, or whether it was in the Central Command, or whether it was in as the commander of ISAF, International Security Assistance Force in Afghanistan. And I think that foresight has been an extraordinarily valuable asset that commanders have had to have, and I couldn't be happier than to see that you're embracing it with a true panel of experts here today, but more broadly with your organization you have founded and are leading at this point. As I think about the mega trends that will define opportunity, both in Central and Eastern Europe, in the Black Sea region, but the mega trends that are going to define so much of what we think will influence or affect strategy going forward, I think of typically 5 different areas. The first is the evolution and the development of a global economy that is shifting in pretty dramatic ways. And we have seen this global economy and the power of the global economy shift pretty dramatically to the east from where we had seen it traditionally anchored in Europe with its relationship to North America. But this shift has created opportunities in the east, both in terms of opportunity for China, emerging opportunity for India, the great democracies and their economies in East Asia that we have just never seen before. And it's going to create an opportunity, I think, for us as we go forward, particularly for Central Eastern Europe, with the relationships that can be forged by that region with the great economies that we see taking advantage of this change in global economic power. The second area is an area of the change in demography in the world. The demographics are changing. And this is something that's very important to me as I spent time on the ground in the Middle East, and especially in Southeast Asia as well. Those populations, and in particular, in particular, Africa, those populations are increasing in their size, and they're getting younger. And we have to take that into account with respect to the strengths of their governments and their capacity to provide opportunity for this increasing population of youth in many places in the world. Meanwhile, in the north, the developed north, populations are aging. They're either growing at a very small rate, or they're static, or they're in fact shrinking. And the changes in demography are going to have a dramatic effect on politics and ultimately economic opportunity going forward. Third area is rapid urbanization. The migration into the cities in the world are going to create opportunities, but also challenges that we can't now foresee. By the middle of this century, more than half the world's population will be located in urban centers. And by 2070, we could see 3/4 of the world's population either in cities or ultimately in cities or in urban centers as they go forward. And this urban sprawl that we'll see evolve is going to be one where we'll have to think about the effects that will have both on stability of governance, but also opportunities that will be available to populations as they go forward. An area that I know you've done a lot of work in, it's important work, is in the area of emerging technologies. You know, the size of technology as it's moving forward, the speed with which it is evolving, provide opportunities that we could not have imagined just 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. High performance computing, data analysis, artificial intelligence, generative AI, large language models. This is creating opportunities, again, that as we think about foresight with regard to strategic decision making, leaders are going to need to contemplate. And this is one of the challenges I find today as I talk with CEOs around the world. They really have not been able to embrace the synergy that comes from many of these intersecting capabilities in the technology field. And then finally, and I know that you've done a lot of work here as well, and that's in climate. Climate is the juggernaut that's coming at all of us. And when I'm asked the question at a security level, what is one of the greatest threats that the United States faces or our allies face in the future? It is truly the challenge of climate and the many different economic and physical effects that will become a challenge for us as we go forward. Now, one final point on convergence, because many of these things are converging as we speak. The youthful populations are moving into the cities where there are weak and unstable governments that don't have access to the evolving economic opportunities that we see. All of these things are converging in ways that foresight and the development of foresight can provide leaders with the capacity to decide about. And that's why I'm very keen to see the work that you have done. This paper really captures many of these potential disruptive futures. And again, I'm very sorry I couldn't be with you today to see all the dear friends that I have in the region and to participate in the great conversations of the Bucharest gathering. But I wish you all the best. And thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, John Allen. So John Allen has been a friend and mentor since pretty much the first month of this business, and that's why we asked him to be part of this. He is currently being pulled in many directions given his broad background in leadership, and was at the UN on Monday talking about genocide, and somewhere else Tuesday, and then we met with him Tuesday night. So can we do that one more slide? Is that okay? In just 1 minute. Concept to undermine political, military, economic rule of law in this region in particular. So I don't have time to get into this whole thing. It really is a escalation of what Russian strategy is doing today. And I'd like to highlight, though, the disinformation poison being an absolute central part of it. I made a comment this morning about disinformation being a weapon, and it's constantly delivered to each one of our phones and specifically targeted at vulnerable populations. So that's an issue that we're going to have to do a lot more study and a lot more integration with everything else going on. So with that, I don't know if we have a few extra minutes, planners. All right, I'll wrap up then, and then if you let people ask questions, it's up to you guys. So just as a kind of a summary of where we are, We've seen the rapid transition we discussed today in energy infrastructure in this region, strengthening of defense and security posture within NATO, the nearshoring, de-risking of manufacturing base, the institutionalization of anti-corruption laws to protect economic competition, the integrity of the political process, and to improve trust in government. So we didn't want to leave on a negative note. We wanted to say this region is really standing at the forefront of where the world is going and has a lot of promise, and we want to be part of that promise. But what we've seen is that we need to be more explicit and systematic about how we monitor these trends, specifically the trends as they're playing out on the ground in this region. So I think I'll just wrap it up at that. All right, if people are still here, then they want to ask questions potentially. Do you have any questions from the audience? Nope, everyone just wants to go to happy hour. Okay.
Thank you very much. Steve Shapiro from the Atlantic Council. I was just saying that first time I saw this kind of under the radar, which we call hybrid today, I called War 2.0 in 2010 in a paper for the SACEUR. NATO, as the SACEUR disputed not only every point I was making, but said that this is not NATO's job in any case. And I find this still to be a difficult crux of the matter and insufficiently addressed in our discussions, assuming, which we know all of this to be true, and assuming this is a method of warfare, which we know to be true, there isn't an organization that's capable of, or even a multiple of organizations that's capable of responding to these things on a strategic basis. And the thing that perhaps is missing here is that all of this stuff, when you go back to 2009, the Estonia takedown for cyber, the first time we saw that happen, all this stuff is deliverable. Many of these things are traditional historic warfare weapons. A few are new because we have new tech, but but what's different is the ability to precisely target, strategically bundle, and instantaneously deliver them. That to me makes this a whole new kind of warfare. And the absence of an organization that can look at this as a whole and fight it, whether it's a multinational or domestic organization, to me is the biggest problem. And I just thought I could put that out there for comment or just for bemoaning's sake.
Bemoaning is always
bemoaning
helpful.
is the first step, right? Okay.
But what I would say is one of the reasons, and I didn't mention this in this particular speech here, but one of the key reasons we wanted to do this is because we saw many times, like your example, where we were thoroughly going through like what could happen and got to the decision maker level and they just didn't want to hear it, right? Especially if it's not a good thing that they have to take action on. So it is just sort of an intrinsic problem with human nature. But what we'd like to do, what we're in the process of doing, is building that global network wherever people sit that want to be part of this conversation so that we can percolate it up. We did also talk about, Lori Garrett covered global health, pandemics, and climate change all together in an amazing video. If anyone would like to see it, it was an hour and 40 minutes of amazingness. And she was talking about supranational, like the supranational organizations that have to be there. And we also have to push it from the ground up too, and connect those ground up elements. So that sounds ambitious, but we do need to try. And I think my motto is that we are providing a way to do systematic thinking so that wishful thinking is not your answer, right?
That's a good, I like that answer. And of course, the real answer is, the first thing we have to do is talk about it. Yeah. And congratulations on this presentation.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you. Do we have any other questions? We have time for one more. Right there.
Thank you. Thank you for a very, very, very interesting presentation and challenging. But at the same time, I would raise an issue. Of course, we are here in Romania. That would mean that you are interested in the region, meaning Eastern Europe, plus a little bit Central Europe. It seems to me that such kind of approach which you have applied is, how to say, influenced by Mackinder, by the fact that Eastern Europe is the most important region between the great powers, or Russia, Western Europe, now China, USA. It seems to me that we would have to think in other way in order to, because the changes should have been in the region and in the global environment since the beginning of the 20th century, when Mackinder raised this issue, being taught by the maps, not otherwise. It's a moment in which you would have to think in another way. Otherwise, your presentation had been very challenging. Now I am thinking what would happen to Romania if Russia would remain the same and Ukraine would be defeated and things like that. It's okay.
Yeah,
But
and I'd like to actually turn that to Paul, because Paul did a lot of thinking on that. And the idea that there are other models is certainly a really important part of generating this network to do this thinking, but do it in a systematic way with people who have done Foresight for years. Paul, did you want to address that?
To say that the Mackinder idea of the rimlands versus the heartland, the World Island, it's not the only model. It's very powerful, though. It's probably behind many of the ways that the Russians think about it, and we have to be sensitive to that. But power will distribute itself in other ways that Mackinder back in 1900 couldn't imagine, and we have to keep sensitive to the way that's happening. Where is economic growth? Where is demographic growth or decline? Because that's where power will migrate to, and it will change the way that competition will be geographically fought out for the rest of the century. So I agree. Another set of understandings is possible for geopolitics, but at the moment we're faced with
from the region right now. And so welcome all, and I'll have more information over here if you'd like to grab it. But thank you, everybody. Sorry we went over for a bit, but thank you for your rapt attention, and really appreciate it, and have a lovely night.